Some SUVs lose value so fast that dealers practically give them away, and that's exactly why smart buyers are watching them. We're talking under $10,000, sometimes well under $5,000. These overlooked crossovers offer easy entry, excellent visibility, cheap upkeep, and, in the right model years, reliability that borders on legendary. Today we're counting down 5 of them, built specifically for senior drivers who want comfort without the drama. We're starting with an easy bargain at number 5 and ending with a nearly bulletproof pick at number 1. Let's get into it. Number 5. Kia Soul. Best visibility and easiest entry. Let's start with the Kia Soul, specifically the second generation models from 2014 through 2019. Yes, that boxy shape looks more like a toaster on wheels than a senior-friendly SUV, but that shape is the entire point. Most buyers walk past the Soul expecting cheap box reliability. What they actually get is one of the most underrated ownership experiences on the used market, and one of the cheapest. Clean examples with moderate mileage regularly sell in the $5,000 to $8,000 range, sometimes lower from a private seller. The upright greenhouse design means huge windows on every side, which translates to sightlines that put most modern crossovers to shame. No thick pillars blocking your view at intersections. No straining your neck to check blind spots. For a driver who wants confidence pulling out of a parking lot, that matters more than horsepower ever will. Consumer Reports has repeatedly flagged the Soul as one of the more dependable small crossovers in its class, and J.D. Power ownership scores back that up. The 2.0-liter 4-cylinder is naturally aspirated and mechanically simple. No turbocharger, no complex hybrid system, fewer parts to eventually fail. RepairPal data puts the Soul's average annual repair cost meaningfully below the compact SUV average, and owners routinely report crossing 150,000 miles with nothing beyond scheduled maintenance. Fuel economy is another quiet advantage worth putting a number on. The 2.0-liter Soul returns around 24 to 30 miles per gallon depending on trim and driving conditions. Not hybrid territory, but respectable for a vehicle this size, and enough to keep monthly fuel costs predictable for someone on a fixed budget. Combine that with an EPA-rated cargo area that outperforms several small sedans, and the Soul starts to look less like a compromise and more like a genuinely smart, purpose-built errand vehicle. The infotainment setup in these years also deserves a mention because it avoids a trap a lot of newer vehicles fall into. Base and mid-trim Souls from this era use a simple touchscreen paired with physical volume and tuning knobs. No gesture controls, no multi-layered menu systems, nothing that requires a tech-savvy passenger to operate. For a driver who just wants to set the radio station and leave it alone, that simplicity removes an entire category of daily frustration that plagues a lot of newer tech-heavy crossovers. Watch out for a handful of these years experience clutch and dual clutch transmission issues on the automatic equipped models built specifically in 2014 and 2015. A 5-minute vehicle history check and a test drive that includes a few full stops will tell you everything you need to know before buying. Outside of that specific window, the drivetrain is straightforward and well understood by any independent shop. If you're shopping specific trims, the Plus and Exclaim trims from 2018 and 2019 tend to be the sweet spot. Enough factory options like heated seats and a backup camera to add real comfort without the added complexity or repair cost of chasing the top-tier Exclaim turbo models from earlier years, which used a different, less proven engine and transmission combination. Insurance is another area where the Soul quietly outperforms expectations. Because it's rated as a low-value, low-horsepower vehicle with a strong safety record, premiums typically run noticeably below the compact SUV average, often one of the cheapest vehicles to insure in this entire lineup. For a driver on a fixed income comparing multiple quotes, that difference adds up to real money every single year, not just at the point of purchase. Breaking down a realistic annual maintenance budget helps put this in perspective. RepairPal estimates average annual repair costs on the Soul in the low $300 range, well below the compact SUV segment average of closer to $500. Add routine items, an oil change every 5,000 to 7,500 miles, brake pads roughly every 30,000 to 40,000 miles, a set of tires every 40,000 to 50,000 miles, and a driver can reasonably budget under $1,000 a year for total upkeep on a well-maintained example, excluding fuel and insurance. Kia's Kia's warranty coverage also deserves a mention for buyers, considering a slightly newer example. The original powertrain warranty on these years ran 10 years or 100,000 miles from new, which means a Soul purchased with, say, 70,000 miles on the odometer might still carry a few remaining years of factory powertrain coverage. Worth checking the VIN against Kia's warranty lookup tool before finalizing a purchase, since it can meaningfully reduce the financial risk of buying used, and it's a benefit none of the other 4 vehicles on this list can match at this price point. The Soul earns its spot at number 5 because it's good, genuinely, reliably good, but it's not quite bulletproof. What's coming up next takes that same cheap, no drama philosophy and adds real all-weather confidence when the roads turn ugly. Number 4, Chevrolet Equinox, best cheap spacious SUV. Number 4 is a name a lot of people underestimate for the wrong reasons, the Chevrolet Equinox. Specifically, we're pointing you toward the earlier V6 equipped models from 2006 through 2009, or the revised 4-cylinder models from 2014 and later, and not every Equinox ever built. There's a real reason for that distinction, and we'll get to it. The first thing seniors notice sitting in an Equinox is the seat height and door opening. GM engineered a wide door swing and a seat that sits at nearly the ideal level for stepping in without dropping or climbing. Add a spacious back seat and a trunk that swallows a full grocery run plus a folded walker, and you understand why this one keeps quietly showing up on used lots at prices that make dealers nervous to advertise, often $6,000 to $9,000 for a well-kept example. NHTSA and IIHS testing on these years holds up respectably, particularly around structural integrity, and the added mass of a mid-size crossover generally protects occupants better than a smaller, lighter vehicle in a real-world collision. Watch out for the 2010 through 2013 model years specifically, which used a 2.4-liter Ecotec engine that developed a well-documented reputation for excessive oil consumption. This isn't a rumor, it's one of the most searched Equinox complaints online, and it's the reason we're steering you toward the years before and after that window instead. If you already own or find one from those years, more frequent oil checks between changes are non-negotiable. Several of these model years also offered all-wheel drive as an available option rather than an expensive separate trim for a driver living somewhere that sees ice or snow part of the year. That traction margin means fewer white-knuckle moments pulling out of an icy driveway. Picture a realistic ownership scenario. A driver picks up a 2015 Equinox LT with around 80,000 miles for roughly $7,000. Over the next 5 years, routine maintenance, brakes, tires, fluids, runs a few $100s a year on average, well within RepairPal's below average cost estimate for the mid-size SUV class. No major component failures because the problematic 2010 to 2013 engine years were avoided from the start. That's the kind of boring, predictable ownership story this recommendation is built around. If you're cross-shopping trims, the LT and LTZ tend to offer the best balance of comfort features, heated seats, a larger touchscreen, and a power driver's seat with memory settings, without pushing into the higher price bracket that the top-tier trims command. The base LS trim saves a little more money, but skips some of those comfort touches that make a real difference for daily use. Compared to a Ford Escape from the same era, the Equinox generally offers more rear legroom and a larger trunk at the cost of slightly worse fuel economy, typically 22 to 26 miles per gallon, depending on drivetrain and model year. For a driver who prioritizes space and comfort for grandkids or a caregiver riding along over squeezing out a few extra miles per gallon, that trade-off tends to favor the Equinox. Combined with a rated towing capacity of up to 1,500 pounds on properly equipped models, there's also an overlooked advantage in how forgiving the Equinox is to shop for used. Before we move to number 3, let's pause for a second. Quick pause. If this list is actually helping you shop smarter, hit that subscribe button. We dig up the cheap, reliable used vehicles dealerships would rather you didn't notice. Now back to the countdown. At number 3, the Ford Escape. And here's where this pick gets genuinely interesting, because buying the wrong version can turn this bargain into a nightmare, while buying the right one gives you one of the cheapest SUVs to own on this entire list. Same generation, same body, 2 completely different ownership stories, depending on one decision: which engine is under the hood. We're talking about the 3rd generation Escape, built from 2013 through 2019. Ford offered these with a turbocharged 1.6-liter EcoBoost engine in the earlier years, and that specific engine developed a documented reputation for coolant intrusion issues that could lead to overheating and, in some cases, engine fires, serious enough that it triggered a Ford recall covering roughly 2013 through 2014 model year Escapes equipped with that engine. That's the version to avoid. The version to buy is the naturally aspirated 2.5-liter 4-cylinder, offered across these same model years in S and SE trims, or the later, more reliable 2.0-liter EcoBoost that replaced the troubled 1.6 starting around 2017. If you're shopping listings, the engine size is usually printed right on the window sticker or the trim badge. A detail worth confirming before you even schedule a test drive, since it immediately narrows the search to the versions worth pursuing. Because so many shoppers don't know this distinction exists, the entire Escape nameplate carries a reputation hit that unfairly drags down resale values on the trims that never had the problem, meaning you can often find a clean, non-turbo Escape for $5,500 to $8,500, well below what the reliability of that specific engine actually deserves. Practicality is another underrated strength here. The SE and titanium trims offer a power liftgate on many model years, a genuinely useful feature for a driver who doesn't want to wrestle with a heavy trunk lid while holding groceries or medical supplies. Rear seats fold nearly flat, and the cargo floor sits at a height that makes loading and unloading easier than many taller, bulkier SUVs on the market. Outward visibility is the other reason the Escape earns its spot. Ford gave this generation a relatively low belt line and a cabin designed for genuine sightlines. Add a raised seating position for easy entry and exit, and light, predictable steering that doesn't demand upper body strength at low speeds, and you've got a cabin built around exactly what matters most for older drivers. Fuel economy on the recommended 2.5-liter version lands around 21 to 29 miles per gallon, depending on drivetrain, with front-wheel drive versions sitting at the higher end of that range. That's respectable for a vehicle this size, and it means a driver doing mostly local errands will rarely need to think about fuel costs beyond routine fill-ups. That combination of transparency and low inspection costs makes the Escape one of the easier used vehicles on this list to buy with real confidence. Trade-in value on the non-turbo trims tends to depreciate slowly once it reaches this price point, since the vehicle has already absorbed most of its steepest depreciation in the first several years of ownership. That means a buyer who purchases at $5,500 to $8,500 and drives it for another 5 to 7 years can often recoup a meaningful portion of that purchase price at trade-in time. For family members helping an older relative shop for this vehicle, coolant intrusion recall was ever addressed on that specific vehicle, a small step that removes nearly all the risk associated with this particular generation, and one worth doing before scheduling a test drive, not after. Watch out for beyond the engine issue. Check that any timing chain service and transmission fluid changes are documented in the vehicle history, since both were occasionally skipped by previous owners on higher mileage examples. A pre-purchase inspection on this platform typically takes an independent mechanic under an hour, since the non-turbo engine is so well understood. It's not the flashiest SUV on this list, but it's a smart, overlooked choice at a price that should be getting far more attention. Who it's for: a shopper willing to spend 10 extra minutes confirming the engine and service history before buying. A small effort that unlocks one of the best value propositions on this entire list. Who it's not for: someone buying sight unseen from a listing photo without verifying which engine is actually under the hood, since that single detail is the difference between a bargain and a genuine headache. What's coming up at number 2 takes everything good about the Escape: visibility, comfort, low cost, and adds a reliability reputation that borders on legendary. Number 2, Honda CR-V. Best overall reliability to value balance. Number 2 is where this list stops being about pretty good and starts being about genuinely exceptional. The Honda CR-V, specifically the third generation models from 2007 through 2011, has one of the strongest reliability track records of any crossover sold in America, backed by more than a decade of JD Power dependability studies and Consumer Reports owner survey data landing at or near the top of its class. To be clear, that doesn't mean nothing ever goes wrong. Like any vehicle pushing 15 plus years old, you'll eventually deal with normal wear items. Suspension bushings, an aging AC compressor, maybe a sensor here or there. What sets the CR-V apart is that its problems tend to be predictable, cheap to fix, and far less catastrophic than what you'll find in many competitors from the same era. That's a meaningfully different promise than nothing goes wrong, and it's the honest one. Honda engineered this cabin around comfort and simplicity long before senior-friendly design became a marketing buzzword. The seats sit at a height that makes entry and exit almost effortless, and the dashboard uses large, tactile buttons instead of confusing touchscreen menus. The four-cylinder engine is naturally aspirated, chain-driven in most trims, and mechanically straightforward enough that independent shops consider it one of the easiest engines in the industry to keep alive. If you're comparing this third-generation CR-V to the earlier 2002 to 2006 second generation, know that both share the same reputation for durability, but the third generation adds a noticeably quieter cabin, improved crash test structure, and a more comfortable ride. Worth the modest price premium if you can find one in your budget. Either generation beats chasing a newer, more expensive CR-V just for updated styling, since the underlying reliability story doesn't meaningfully change until later. More complex generations with turbocharged engines enter the picture. One complaint that surfaces in owner forums is a slipping automatic transmission on high mileage examples that skipped fluid changes. This isn't a design flaw so much as a maintenance neglect issue. A transmission fluid change every 60,000 miles all but eliminates the risk, and it's cheap insurance worth confirming in the service history before you buy. If you're narrowing down specific years within this generation, 2010 and 2011 tend to be the sweet spot. Honda made small refinements to the interior and added a standard rear view camera on higher trims, while still using the same well-proven engine and transmission as the earlier 2007 through 2009 models. Fuel economy across the generation runs a consistent 21 to 27 miles per gallon depending on drivetrain, respectable for a vehicle this size and roomy enough to carry a walker, groceries, and a passenger comfortably. It's worth being upfront that this generation predates the more advanced driver assist technology, adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking that became common on newer vehicles. For a driver who specifically wants those features, a newer CR-V would be necessary at a significantly higher price point. But for a driver who prioritizes fundamental reliability and simplicity over the latest safety tech, this generation still delivers a genuinely well-built, well-tested platform without asking you to pay for features you may not use. Watch out for rust in the rear subframe and fuel lines on examples from colder, salt-heavy states, especially on vehicles that spent their life in the Rust Belt or Northeast. Outside of that regional risk, the mechanical story holds up well. Expect to pay roughly $7,000 to $10,000 for a clean, well-documented example. Resale value on these holds up noticeably better than most competitors, a direct reflection of how deep the reliability reputation runs. You're paying used economy car money for a track record most manufacturers spend decades trying to build. It's not flashy or fast, and it doesn't need to be. Who it's not for, a strict bargain hunter chasing the absolute lowest sticker price on this list. That's what the first three entries are for, and there's no shame in prioritizing price over pedigree. There's exactly one SUV on this list that takes reliability even further. Number 1. Toyota RAV4. Best long-term reliability. That brings us to number 1. The Toyota RAV4, specifically the third generation models built from 2006 through 2012, widely regarded as one of the most reliable vehicles ever mass-produced, period. Consumer Reports has ranked this generation among the most dependable vehicles in its entire database, not just within the compact SUV class. Owners routinely report crossing 200,000 miles with nothing beyond scheduled maintenance, and high-mileage examples pushing past 250,000 or even 300,000 miles aren't rare. To be fair to every other vehicle on this list, that doesn't mean the RAV4 is flawless. No 15 to 20-year-old vehicle is. Watch out for frame and rear subframe rust on examples from northern salt-heavy states. The same regional risk that affects the CR-V, and worth checking underneath before you buy regardless of how clean the interior looks. Also confirmed the timing belt and water pump have been replaced on schedule, since neglecting that service is the single most common way an otherwise excellent RAV4 turns into an expensive one. When shopping, you'll find both front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive versions of this generation. For a driver in a milder climate, the front-wheel drive model is lighter, slightly more fuel efficient, and marginally cheaper to maintain since there's no transfer case or rear differential to service. For anyone dealing with regular snow or ice, the AWD system on this generation has its own strong reliability reputation and is worth the modest price premium. Either way, third row seating was available on some trims. Worth checking if you occasionally need extra seats for visiting family, though most buyers on this list will find the standard 5-seat layout plenty spacious. A practical sourcing tip: because this generation is so widely trusted, private party listings tend to move fast, sometimes within days of posting. Dealer trade-ins and off-lease inventory from used car superstores are often a more reliable source for finding one with a documented service history, even if the price runs slightly higher than a private sale. Within this generation, 2009 and later models received a mild refresh with improved interior materials and slightly updated safety tech, while still using the same well-proven 4-cylinder engine as the earlier 2006 through 2008 models, meaning you don't sacrifice reliability by shopping the later, more refined years if your budget allows for it. Cargo space is genuinely competitive with the Equinox and CR-V on this list, with rear seats that fold nearly flat for hauling larger items like a wheelchair or mobility scooter, typically running a few hundred to just over $1,000 a year depending on the level of coverage chosen. For a buyer who wants an extra safety net without paying dealership prices for a certified pre-owned program, that's a reasonable middle ground worth researching before finalizing a purchase. And one more reason this generation continues to earn its reputation as the safest bet on this entire list. For a senior driver, the cabin sits at a genuinely ideal height, tall enough for effortless entry, low enough that you're not hoisting yourself up like a full-size SUV. Outward visibility is excellent, and the dashboard keeps things refreshingly analog. Real buttons, real dials. Expect to pay somewhere between $7,500 and $11,000 for a well-maintained example. The highest price on this list, but arguably the best dollar for mile value, and parts availability is about as good as it gets in the used market. Cheap to insure, cheap to maintain, and about as close to bulletproof as a used SUV gets. Who it's for: a driver who wants the single strongest long-term reliability track record on this list and is willing to pay slightly more upfront to get it. Who it's not for: honestly, it's hard to argue against this one for almost any senior driver's needs, which is exactly why it earned the top spot. So that's the list. From an easy bargain at number 5 to a nearly bulletproof RAV4 at number 1, every one of these can put you in a comfortable, senior-friendly SUV for a fraction of what a new crossover costs. Which one would you actually trust with your own money? The Soul, the Escape, the CR-V, or that RAV4? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to avoid the used SUVs that look like bargains but can quietly destroy your wallet, watch this next.